Topics with Mal and Rachel, and today we're going to be talking about language in Judges chapter 12, verse 5 through 6. It says, "The Gileadites captured the fords of the Jordan leading to Ephraim, and whenever a survivor of Ephraim said, 'Let me cross over,' the men of Gilead asked him, 'Are you an Ephraimite?' If he replied, 'No,' they said, 'All right, say Shibboleth.' If he said Sibboleth, because he could not pronounce the word correctly, they seized him and killed him at the fords of the Jordan. 42,000 Ephraimites were killed at that time." So this just goes to show you how important language is, and the different accents that we all have that display what region we're from. And I mean, at first you might be like, oh, well, this doesn't really relate to us now because it's an Old Testament story. But they knew who he was and who these people were by their language.
Yeah.
And that speaks so much to us now, because how many of us as Christians, people know us by our language because we don't use profanity like other people do in our workplace or, in a restaurant or something.
Yeah.
So the way we speak just shows what we belong to.
Yeah, when we were thinking about doing this video, we were like, well, Judges, there's a lot of battles that happen in Judges, and it can get kind of monotonous if you don't pay attention to the details and the names and what the meanings of the names are and the places that they were fighting at and for. And we just thought that these two verses in Judges 12 was really interesting because there is a parallel between our lives now, living under grace, and their lives in the Old Testament under that law. And so what we decided was, well, if they knew him by his language, people know us by our language too. So if we speak as Christ spoke, if we speak in love, or we speak seeing people's potential and calling out that champion in them, then people will know who we belong to. They'll know that we belong to Christ because we're speaking with his language. We're speaking in love like he spoke. But if we're like grumbling and complaining, if we're always annoyed or tired or mad, if we're always having that downcast attitude and that sour face, then people are going to know that we belong to our circumstances or our attitudes, and we're letting those control how we speak to ourselves and how we speak to others as well. So when we were reading this, we said, oh my gosh, how are we speaking in our homes? How are we speaking to those who know us the best, our families? How are we speaking to people behind closed doors when, what stays in the house, what happens in the house stays in the house? But how are we speaking to them? Are we speaking to our siblings? Are we speaking to our parents and our extended family? Are we speaking in love, even when they can be frustrating or when we can frustrate them? Or are we just spouting off whatever comes to mind without even thinking about how we can speak life in that situation? Another example would be, how are we speaking in our workplaces? We've all had those weeks where Monday seems to last all week long, and it can get really hard to have a good attitude when we're at work. But it's still important because our coworkers are looking to us, whether they're Christian or not, they're still looking to us to be an example.
Yeah.
They're still looking and seeing, okay, what kind of language are they using in this situation? What kind of language are they using for that person or that situation with that person? And so we were just thinking, wow, people do recognize us by our language. People recognize us by how we speak.
So language is not just like the spoken words. It's actually like 93% of our language is nonverbals.
Yeah.
So that means like body language. Are we slouching when we sit, or is our tone of voice really high? Just our pitch and how we act. I can say, oh, I'm really excited to hear you speak today, and like I'm not excited at all. Everything about me says no.
Yeah.
My voice is monotone and I sound like I'm bored. So our nonverbals are such a huge indicator of how we truly feel.
Yeah.
And some people are good at detecting that.
Yeah.
Some people aren't. But God doesn't get fooled by anything. You know, you can be like, God, you know, I'm really happy for today. Like, yeah, you know, thanks. You know, that doesn't,
yeah.
you know, God can discern with us. I mean, he made us, you know.
How we act and our tone of voice and our pitch and everything like that all has to do with our language. Language is made up of more than just verbal communication. It's made up of the nonverbals. And like Rachel said, I mean, the larger portion of language and communication is through nonverbals. So how are we acting when we're speaking? How are we acting when we're faced with a situation that we might not agree with, or that just is it's just shaking our world and it's turned upside down? How are we speaking? Do we immediately go to I'm annoyed with this situation, I don't like this person anymore, and I'm grumbling about it? Or do we go and say, okay, well, what can I learn from this situation? God, what do you want to teach me? Because that also shows where our hearts are at, where our focus is at. Your language shows where your heart's at. Yeah. Because out of the heart the mouth speaks. So at church, with friends, at home, at work, in all these various situations, how are we speaking? Because people do recognize us by our language.
And a lot of people are always looking to how we act when something happens to us, whether it's like, you know, something drastic like a loved one passing away, or, you know, your car broke down or something like that. People are always watching to see what's their response going to be. Is it going to be out of love and out of faith that God's still going to provide for us, or is it going to be how they would respond, you know? And you may read this and be like, well, it's talking about like one word, but there's so much that's going on, you know. I mean, as Mal can attest to this as she's studying, you know.
So since I'm studying language, this passage really stood out to me because while it is only one word, it was part of a language. So we communicate with our language. We also communicate with our accents. So people from different regions of the country will have different accents. You will know where before they even tell you where they're from, you can listen to their accent and say, okay, well, you're not from around here. Yeah. They knew, okay, say this word. And then if they said Sibboleth instead of Shibboleth, it's just a slight difference. And that's the thing. The slightest difference in our language can make the biggest impact. Yeah, exactly. The slightest attitude shift will speak louder than our words could ever speak. I mean, we could preach all we want to our coworkers and our family members and our church members, and we can say all that we want to say, but if we're not acting in combination with what words we're saying, then our language isn't complete. Yeah. Does that make sense? Like, our language won't be complete in conveying who we belong to. If we belong to Christ, we'll speak and act like Christ acted when he was here. If we belong to our attitudes or our circumstances or whatever our bad day brought to us, then we will speak and act as if everything's gone downhill, it's hopeless, but we do have a hope. And we need to start speaking with that hopeful language.
So we hope you guys learned some communication and language knowledge from our talk. So we hope you keep tuning in. Next week we'll have another video for you guys.